Welcome. My name is Rachel Murat, and this is my 25th year of teaching at Maine Endwell High School. Maine Endwell is located just about 6 miles west of Binghamton on the Pennsylvania border. I'm also the 2020 New York State Teacher of the Year. I'd like to thank Buffalo State for not only the opportunity to connect with you, but also for continuing to provide high-quality conference for educators and soon-to-be educators, despite the obstacles that 2020 has presented us. Quality professional development is something that is important throughout our entire education career, and we are so lucky to have this in our backyard. As a Buffalo native, I know that Buffalo State has a history of rigorous programs that produce top-notch career-minded individuals. Now, to give you a little background, since 1996, I have taught a varied course load, including in our social studies department, including everything from Global 9 and 10 all the way up through AP Government and Politics. The ones that are in red on the screen are the ones that I'm currently teaching this year, but I do help collaborate with the ones that I'm not teaching this year. I've also designed 2 courses for our students, which I'll talk to you about later. So circling back to my background and speaking about being a Buffalo native, I wanted to take you back to an important day in my life, September 4th, 1990. So that was my first day of attendance at Ohio University. And for those of you that are wondering why I didn't attend Buff State, my dad had 2 rules about college. One of them was that it couldn't be anywhere in Western New York. And although I didn't really understand why he was making me do that, I was very thankful for it after the fact, because it did make me become a much more independent person, being 7.5 hours away. So anyway, back to September 4th, 1990. I entered Ohio University. I knew one thing. That one thing is I didn't want to be a teacher. My dad was a teacher. My grandma was a teacher. I have several teachers in the family. I taught swimming lessons. I figured I knew what teaching was all about. Wasn't for me. So I went into school thinking that I was going to go to law school. And very soon after you get into your freshman year, you have to meet with your academic advisor. And I met with him. And he said, so what is it that you want to do? And I said, well, I think I want to go to law school. And he said, well, that's great, but do you know that there's more practicing lawyers? Excuse me, there's more people in college than there are practicing lawyers. And I thought about that for a minute and I thought, I don't know. And he said, do you want to be a number? I said, not really. So then that ended that conversation. And although my dad was not very happy about that, I decided I would try to figure out what it was I want to do. Because remember, I knew I did not want to be a teacher. So I briefly thought about physical therapy, sports medicine, things along those lines, got myself into an organic chemistry class. Day 1, decided, I love science, but not organic chemistry. So I had to figure out something else to do. So that was freshman and sophomore year of me trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do with my life. And at the beginning of my junior year, I was on the phone with my dad, as I did, every Sunday. And he said, you need to pick a major and I want to know what it is by Friday. So I thought to myself, okay, self, you have 6 days to figure out the rest of your life. So I had several friends who were already in the College of Education. So I figured, why not? I'll go in there. Well, I sat in my first education class, and about 15 minutes into that class, I realized this is where I needed to be. This is where I should have always been. But in my mind, I had closed that door. And I think that that's a really important story to share with kids, because I don't know if you have this experience, but I teach a lot of seniors, and they often talk to me about the fact that there's this notion that when they turn 18, they're supposed to know what they want to do for the rest of their lives. And I really feel like we as adults need to make sure that we're sharing our career paths with them. We're sharing the bumps in the road, the potholes, the obstacles, because it's not just you turn 18, you know what you're supposed to do, and life's a breeze from then on. And I think us not sharing our struggles with them actually is a detriment to them. So I had been teaching, I started in 1996, and I've been teaching for a while, and I wear lots of hats like many teachers do. Class advisors, Girl Up, Habitat for Humanity, the mentor program. I mean, basically student council, you name it, I ran the club. I even dabbled in a little coaching, but then I decided that wasn't very athletic. But anyway, so I was going along, humming along, and then all of a sudden I started to notice a difference in myself. And I really didn't like the person that I was turning into be and the person that was showing up to work every day. So I want to fast forward to another important day in my life, and that is April 17th, 2014. So how do I remember that particular day? Because it's the day that I wrote my letter of resignation from what I thought was going to be the career for me. So again, I know that surprises some of you, but let me tell you a story. So I poured my all into learning to be the best teacher, mentor, leader, colleague, friend that I could be. And like most teachers, I worked many more hours than I was paid for. And I loved my job and my role at Main Edwell. And I really enjoyed the fact that I felt like a teacher leader. I maybe didn't have a piece of paper that said I was a leader, but I felt like I was a leader. But then I started to not feel like that. And for several months, I had to talk myself into going to work each day and out of quitting the only profession that I knew. So I thought back to a question that I was asked at my interview, and that was I planning to teach once 30 times or for 30 years? And as I thought back to that question, I realized I set out to teach for 30 years, but I had kind of fallen into teaching once 30 times. So as I sat and wrote my resignation letter, I cried the whole time. And then I put it in my desk drawer. I wanted to think about it for a while, knowing there was no turning back once I handed it in. So by the end of the month, I was leaning heavily towards handing it in. And it wasn't in the drawer anymore. It was now sitting on the top of my desk. And every time that I looked down at it, I knew I'd failed. So one day I was sitting at my desk and I literally was staring at the letter. And my principal walks in and he's asked me if I would attend a conference up in Syracuse, and the district had paid for it, but they couldn't get anybody to go. And I felt like he walked in my room because he knew that I had this inability to say no. But here's the problem. It's not that I have the inability to say no. I was saying yes, not because I wanted to go, but because it got me out of the building for a day. And I realized that was problematic. That was not fair to me. It was not fair to my colleagues. It was not fair to my students, and it was not fair to my community. However, little did I know that that journey to Syracuse would literally change the journey in my life. So I'm sitting in this conference and I'm listening to Eric Sheninger talk about digital leadership, realizing how much my brain hurt and how much learning was going on that day. I also realized I felt energized. I realized I had a different energy about me. I had a different outlook. All of a sudden, I literally felt like this weight had been lifted off of my shoulders. I felt like an energy that hadn't been in me for years was back. So on the way back to school that night, I decided I was putting that letter back in my drawer. I'm gonna put my learning cap back on and I'm gonna give this my all and see if I can do it. So since then, I've attended more than 70 ed camps, hosted 6 of them. I've been known to drive 4 hours one way for a 4-hour ed camp and then drive 4 hours home because I love learning that much. I've presented at local, regional, statewide, and national conferences. The person who wrote that letter of resignation could never have imagined that 6 years later, that would be what I've been able to accomplish. I've traveled the country both in person and virtually to share what I know and to learn with other like-minded educators and to also be challenged by people who are not like-minded, because once you fall into the echo chamber, life is a lot easier, but that's not where the magic happens. The magic happens when you're outside of that echo chamber. And there is not a day that I don't learn something on social media or by reading a book from a colleague, a podcast, you name it. Every day I start my day out with intention because I want to be able to learn something. And as you can see, I'm doing this during school, so there are interruptions, but we have to just keep on going with life because you know what? Resiliency is what 2020 is all about. So theoretically, I can retire in 6 years. 6 years. But I have way too much left to learn to retire in those 6 years. I still have that letter in my drawer, but it's not there as a sign of failure. It's there as a sign of how far I've come. So here's a question I have for you. Have you ever been so confident in the completion of a task or mastering a new skill only to have the universe rear its ugly head and remind you cocky's what you feel right before you know you shouldn't? I think that would describe 2020 for me. I've never been cocky about my teaching skills, but after 23 years, I was feeling like I had a good handle on the 2019-2020 school year and what it would bring. I knew I was teaching 6 classes. I had 5 preps, but I'm like, I got this. And I was prepping to teach AP Government and Politics, US History, both on level and co-taught, Participation in Government, G Suite, and Digital Leadership. Those last 2 courses are the ones I mentioned earlier that I developed for our school district and have been implementing over the past 7 years. I knew each class would bring its own set of challenges, but I was up to that task. And I knew that none of the curriculum I mentioned above could be taught, let alone learned, if it did not focus on relationship building first. I have several mantras in life, and Maslow before Bloom is one of the most important ones. Just as a refresher, Maslow focused on the physiological needs. You cannot do anything in life if you have not met your basic needs. It doesn't matter what you try to teach a kid. If you are not meeting their most basic needs, it's not going to work. And then Bloom focused on content. So for our new pre-service teachers, I cannot stress how important it is that you build a relationship with each of your students. That will be the basis on which you build each day. Now, my students often refer to me as Mama Murat because I'm their first or second mom, depending on their situation. So life lessons, being a good person, showing acts of kindness, empathy, seeking first to understand, and being better today than you were yesterday are all things that are woven into each day in my room. Getting to know your students as people first, showing interest in them outside their academic beings, going to concerts, going to games, asking how their weekend was, asking how their job interview went, things like that. Making sure that you are using the pronouns and name pronounced correctly that they prefer shows that they mean something to you. In my experience, when you have made this a priority, your kids will work harder for you than they ever thought possible. I have kids who didn't know that they could work that hard, and they don't realize they're working that hard because they're enjoying the atmosphere of being in class. One little tip for the new teachers, the worst piece of professional advice that I have ever been given was that you never smile until January. That is the worst piece of advice. So if you hear that, put a smile on your face and just nod because you get it. You get that that smile and making a child feel heard is where the magic starts. One thing that you do need to keep in mind, new teachers, is that sometimes the kid who needs the love the most makes it the most difficult to give. They will act out in ways that you did not think possible. But when you seek first to understand what's going on in their lives and what they are bringing to class with them each day, that will bring a whole new level of understanding and empathy for them. Now, one of the things that I love to do is I love to meet the kids out in the hallway. Now, this is pre-pandemic times, for a hug if they wanted it, some fist bumps, some high fives, smiles, welcoming into the class. I also have some walk-in music and I'm like dancing. I get an eye roll, but you know what? They have a smile on their face too, because they know that I'm bringing the energy. I enjoy what I do and I love having them around. So it's really, really important that you have that connection with your kids. And one of the reasons that I meet them in the hallway is because I want to know, are they walking down the hall like owning it, bringing their A game? Today they are on point. Or are they walking down the hall feeling a little deflated because they just failed a math test the period before, or they got into a fight with their friend earlier that day? Do they look anxious because something's going on at home, or maybe they haven't eaten today or yesterday? That 4 minutes in the hallway is an investment in that class period that pays off with a very high rate of return. I can address problems, make lunch dates, welcome someone back from an absence, and I always say, I missed you yesterday. Tell a kid that I'm glad they are here today. And I know this sounds corny, but you can turn those frowns upside down with a smile. Sometimes it takes a little bit of doing, but it's worth it. Give someone a hug if they ask for it, or let a kid know that you really do care about them. I'm telling you, that's where you got to start, because that will enable you to do everything else that you would like to accomplish in class. So let's go to 2020. This investment in relationship building that I had with my kids didn't end once seeing them at school did. I called each of my students the first week so I could tell them I was thinking about them, that I was still worried about them, asking each of them if they had enough food, if they needed anything, and asked what I could do to ease their anxiety. I made 129 phone calls. That was 2 14-hour days, but I did it, and I'm so glad that I did. Circumstances were changing so fast and so often that I continued talking with each of them each week. Now, for my AP class, which still had to take the test in May, regardless of the conditions that we were in, I had 2 synchronous classes a day. I had one at 11 a.m. and one at 7 p.m. But I also met one-on-one with students who weren't able to make it. I recorded those lessons and had them available for asynchronous learning. If somebody missed a class or missed a call that we had set up, I called them because I was worried about them, not because it was coming out of a punitive place, but a place of concern. I wanted to know I missed them and that I was worried about them. So for my other classes last semester, U.S. History, Digital Leadership, and Participation in Government, I had 10-minute Morat meetings where they would sign up for a Zoom meeting, a phone call, a Google Duo call, Snapchat video call, their choice. And what you see on the screen is the sign-up sheet. So I had a link to a Google Sheet that they were able to edit, and they would pick a time and they would put their name into it. That was a little difficult to manage, but totally worth the extra amount of time. I did switch to bookings this year because I let the technology manage it for me. So somebody can go and sign up for a 10-minute meeting. It sends me an email, it sends them the Zoom link. It's very easy to set up and it's free. So who doesn't want free? All right, but anyway, the mode of communication was their choice, as long as I either A, could see and talk to them, or I could at least just talk to them. Texting or emailing wasn't the way that we were going to accomplish that, because I can't hear what's going on in their lives through a text message. So my AP kids heard about these Morat meetings and they wanted to jump on that train. Even though I was seeing them for class, they still wanted to talk to me. So I started school activities about 6 o'clock every morning and I ended around midnight. I had some kids that at night, right after my AP class, I would call them on Zoom and they and I would work together, separately, but together, for 2 hours just to get some work done. I was trying to help them keep up with their work. I was trying to be a positive presence in their life because unfortunately, several of the students that I had on that Zoom call, I was the only positive presence in their life. Sometimes it was just to figure out the tech or to celebrate what they got done. So I would basically, it was like they were in my classroom before the pandemic and I would get work done and they would get work done. They'd tell me a little story, we'd chit chat a little bit, they'd ask me questions, and it was a great time to be able to connect. So curriculum-wise, after the pandemic hit and the school shut down, the switch to remote really wasn't that big of a challenge for me because I've been a part-time tech integrator for several years at our school, and a lot of the things that I had already had digital components to them. I just had to tweak it a little bit based on the fact that I wasn't actually going to be able to sit in, with a kid if they were trying to get some work done. However, having said all that, what was a challenge for me was not seeing my kids in person. I was doing a tech call with our regional information center, and they were asking me questions, and the head of IT said to me, is there anything that you can do at school that you can't do at home? And the first thing I said, see my kids. Because seeing a kid in person outside of their home can give you clues as to what is going on at home if there's a problem. And now I did not have that avenue for information. And to give you a peek into something else that goes on in the school day for me, and another hat that I wear, is in 2009, after I challenged my participation in government students to come up with a community service project that would go beyond their time at school, they decided that we should found a food pantry. And I was like, okay. Although I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but that pretty much describes a lot of things in my life. But anyway, so we now in 2020 have a district-wide food pantry that allows students to help fundraise, food raise, organize in the pantry, help me pack the bags, help me pack the cars. The only thing they don't do is part of the deliveries because obviously that's confidential. But we deliver bags to about 100 families each Friday who live in food unstable homes in our district. And this program became the MEALS program. And MEALS stands for Maine and Well, Assisting Local Spartans. So when we were facing the sudden shutdown of schools and many workplaces, I knew that our food pantry deliveries had to continue because just because the kids aren't at school doesn't mean that their nutritional needs are being met. Far from it. However, for the first time in 25 years, I was being faced with being locked out of the building. That was a whole other emotional level for me. But let's get back to the food pantry. So I didn't know how long we were going to be out of the building, and I panicked a little bit because I didn't know when I would be able to resume our food deliveries. So I made some calls, and 45 minutes later, I had 25 people at school, and we packed 500 bags. So that was 5 weeks worth of deliveries. It was a hive of activity, and it also reminded me that the community that I work in is second to none. They have always answered the call. We had 2 once in 100-year floods, 5 years apart. Answered the call every time. And so I knew I could count on them. So after we got the bags packed, we had to deliver 5 bags to each of the families. Now, we have people who are on a weekly basis deliver to each, they do a route. And there were 3 people, I think, that couldn't, no, 2 people that couldn't do a route. And so I had 3 routes to do is basically what I'm trying to say. And it took me 9 hours to do that. And it was exhausting, but not because it was physically exhausting. I cried the entire time. Because although I know and am familiar with the 100 families that we deliver to each week, I never had to face the fact that the kids were now stuck inside those dwellings 24/7. Some, in my opinion, not suitable for occupancy, but Child Protective Services seems to disagree with me on that. Some look nice on the outside, but are deplorable on the inside. Then there's those that look nice on the outside and on the inside, but they're not a mentally healthy place to be. School gives a kid a break from all of those things. So the thought of all of those things I was just talking about kept me up for weeks and drove me to stay in daily contact with the kids that I knew to be in food unstable homes, whether I had them in class or not, and to make sure that they had enough heat. Now, for the first 2 weeks, the answer to do you have enough food and is there heat for most kids was, yep, we're good, we're good. And then about 2 weeks into this, it was rather cold in upstate New York. I know, shocking, right? And I got to find out that several of our families had no heat anymore. And their parents had been laid off. They had not been able to access any extra funds through supplemental income programs. And so I found myself making 2 or 3 phone calls a week to NYSEG to pay a bill to get the heat turned back on, to make sure that whatever deposit needed to get paid for the propane. I learned a lot of things about bureaucracy and how to get around them at that time, but it was something that was very important to me because if I was going to expect a kid to be able to learn, they can't learn when they're hungry, and they definitely can't learn when they're freezing to death. I also started making some trips to the grocery store because I couldn't get access to the food pantry. Plus, we had depleted our supplies. So I was going to the grocery store on a regular basis, and then I would just drop a bag of food off at a house. Circling back to my statement earlier, if Maslow doesn't happen, Bloom isn't possible. This is important. So also during the pandemic, there were kids who just couldn't do the work in a place that wasn't supportive and nurturing. Again, school is that place for them, and now they were not having access to school. So for these kids that I had, their grades didn't necessarily come from content completed, but came from those daily phone calls that I made to them to check in. Sometimes we just talked. Sometimes it was about school or assignments for other classes, teacher requirements, but mostly we just talked about life and what they had on their mind. This was literally changing every single day, and they were very anxious about it, and having someone to talk to about it meant the world and made a difference. So sometimes I would have a MRAT meeting with someone that was supposed to last 10 minutes, and the next thing I knew, 30 minutes had gone by, and they've never talked that long on the phone in their life. Why? Because I felt that I needed to. I wanted to make sure that they felt heard and that somebody was there to listen to them. I cannot even tell you how many late night text messages I got asking, can you talk? Not feeling very good right now. Each day, every day, I wake up and I challenge myself to be the educator that I needed when I was young and the one that I would want for my biological children. The pandemic didn't change that, it just intensified it. So as we know, 2020 is supposed to be perfect vision. I don't think that the year of 2020 has really been perfect vision. And I know that we joke about everything, between murder hornets and whatever it is that's on your bingo board, that we joke about it because we need that for our sanity. But I would like to look at some of the gifts that 2020 has given us. First of all, it collectively reminded us how integral schools are in our community. Yes, they're a hub of learning. They're also a hub of socialization. They're a hub of showcasing talent, whether it be art, music, sports, you name it. They are a safe place to be. They are a warm place to be. They are a structured place to be. And they are a place where every kid will get a smile and be heard each day. Secondly, 2020 and the shutdown of schools showed us how quick educators could pivot and literally redefine education and its delivery. I am so proud of the education community. At a time when it would have been easy to throw in the towel and give up, we dug in our heels and we redefined a decades-old educational approach. We learned new things. We connected with students in new ways, and we provided new learning experiences. Thirdly, we were gifted with the insight that we had previously not acknowledged. Schools evened the playing field, like I have said, for many students, and with schools closed, we were no longer able to ignore the inequities of food instability, device availability, and connectivity infrastructure. We could also no longer ignore the inequities of opportunity between schools, states, and regions of the country. These must now be a priority and kept as a priority. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. We are going to let our kids down if we don't keep our eye on the ball. Our future generations, and I can't say this with enough gravity, our future generations are counting on us to make a priority. So some advice that I would like to give new teachers when they're diving into new technology platforms is that you date the tech, but marry the pedagogy. Good pedagogy is good pedagogy. Technology will amplify that. It also amplifies poor technology. We must up our game if we are going to both prepare our kids for their futures and to get the most out of our current learning construct. So I have a couple questions to ask you. When you are designing those lessons, keep these things in mind. Is what you are doing have purpose? Like, what is the purpose that you are assigning that technology platform to use with that task? Does it make the learning more accessible to our learners? And is that tech accessible by all of our learners? Is what we are asking them to do reasonable? Look at it through the lens of a parent. If your biological child had this assignment with these parameters, would you think it was reasonable? Is there choice? Choice to turn their cameras on or leave them off. Very controversial issue, but I'm going to please plead with you. Let them have that choice. There are other ways that they can participate. Having a camera into somebody's house really can expose a lot of things that maybe they don't want the outside world to see and could make them very anxious. They may, if the camera's off, be your best participant. So please give them that choice. Also, do they have choice in the creation that they use to show the mastery of the topic that you're covering or the standards that you're trying to reach? Is there choice in how they access that material? All of these things need to be considered with each lesson that we prepare. It's challenging, but I'm telling you, it is worth it and it is of the utmost importance. So before we part today, I just want to leave you with a few final thoughts. If you are a practicing educator, thank you. Thank you for being an important role model in the lives of all who have been before you. Thank you for rising to the challenge we face day in and day out to provide a safe, loving, and rigorous place to learn. Your presence at this conference, whether virtual or not, shows that you care about your practice and you are an engaged learner who knows that this profession is a lifelong learning journey. If you are a pre-service educator, thank you. Thank you for taking on what will probably be one of the most challenging yet rewarding careers. I must warn you, there will be days that you feel like quitting. I did. But know that there are so many young ones out there that need your creativity, dedication, love, and guidance. I can guarantee that there will be many students who look back at their time in school and remember you not necessarily for the curriculum you taught them, but for the way you saw them as a person and the investment you made in their lives. Your lesson might have been a dumpster fire, and we have all been there, but if you made a child smile and feel heard during the day, that's really what matters in the big picture. Give yourself some grace and space to make mistakes, reflect, and grow. Both you and your students will be better for that process. If you are a professor who is teaching pre-service teachers, thank you. Thank you for passing on the love of the profession, career advice, and imparting our new service teachers with the tools that they will need to meet the ever-changing field, and it is an ever-changing field, that is teaching. Teaching is not a job. It is a life journey that will be full of challenges and so many rewards. So as I close today, I wanted to leave you with my contact information. I'm always up for collaborating and would love to hear from you, even if it's just feedback or you have some questions or you want to talk tech, anything. This is all of the ways that you can contact me, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. So stay safe, take a deep breath, and enjoy every minute you have with your students.